Wallingford, in the shadow of the castle, Matilda's faction, commanded by her son Henry, proved it was still willing to fight King Stephen for the crown. But after 15 years of conflict, both sides had had enough. So, they made a deal. Matilda would surrender her claim to the throne on condition that when Stephen died, her eldest living son Henry would succeed him. A year later, he was crowned King Henry II and proceeded to grow the kingdom into the mighty Angevin Empire. But, once again, what the king had spent his life building, his own children were destined to destroy. King Henry II had 4 surviving legitimate sons, and he planned to divide up his kingdom between them. But they fought bitterly for dominance. Against the odds, Henry's youngest son, John, became king. But King John was deeply unpopular. He lost huge swathes of the Angevin Empire gained by his father, then failed to reclaim them in expensive battles. Paid for by taxing his subjects. Eventually, England's barons could take it no more. They forced John to agree to a charter that restricted his power. The Magna Carta. But he went against his word. Furious, they rebelled, inviting Prince Louis of France to invade England. In 1216, Louis sailed to Dover and set his sights on taking this: Dover Castle. Held by forces loyal to King John, it was commanded by Hubert de Burgh. He described the castle as the key to England. He was right. If it fell to the French, so would the kingdom. Asked to invade by the rebel barons, Prince Louis's French army launched an assault on the castle at Dover. Opening a crack in the outer defenses, the invading forces charged the castle walls. The garrison at Dover would meet the French with clenched fists and an iron will. Dover could not fall. Commander Hubert de Burgh rallied his men to hold back the French and defend the castle.
Act deactivated.
While the castle's garrison thwarted the first French attack and prepared for a second, a new resistance force was building in the English countryside. A skilled bowman and fierce patriot, known as Willikin of the Weald, began to muster a resistance to the French invasion. Determined to keep the crown in King John's hands, Willikin would rally every available archer to the cause.
Hästes är nåt på, men...
What needeth be undone? What seek the Hestes? I think they lister.
Boa is a boon.
Clon, this is a mickle matter. Ut ridende nu.
Jefe me awe men gongendes ben. Dresset jou arwayman.
Shall tende! Unna tos!
Thy Hestes, which liveth with you.
bowmen assembled, Willikin planned to ambush the French siege engines on their way to the enemy camp.
Gereth Hestus. Hestus and on, bowmen. It can do.
Arachnitas Yara! Surface!
Mikkel Aradas. Hestes cometh, Arwemen. Foliende Hestes. Asterias, Rathe Arwemen. It's in Shefendeus!
Willikin's band of archers made short work of the French reinforcements. But if they hoped to ease the burden on Dover's garrison, Willikin's ambush force could not relent.
It is Caesar Foractus. Fourth one.
I'm sweet, sir, yes, sir.
Nu, Tulkes, setteth yard. Jute is none burden.
Hestes cometh, Arwemen!
Getteth thee ready for Hestes. Ut readeth nu, Tulkes.
Gereth Hestes!
Look a be thee ready, Freckes. I shall lede jou. Andente to serve.
Bo is ibun.
Every John, intended. Und zu Shepende.
Siobhan, spay off Marken.
Niemand too much arwas! Kanika, stand in the yard! Marcus Smith!
Attendant no, Tolkas. We aren't going there, Tolkas. Knitas! In the top! Honor victory! Sultans!
The French launched a renewed attack on the castle. But thanks to Willikin's ambush force, the enemy had been greatly weakened.
Crossbows, yeah, on the way, tending! Aim it low, crossbowers!
With Willikin's archers weakening the siege from outside the castle, the garrison at Dover repelled the French attack. Willikin ordered his archers to resume their strikes on the French reinforcements.
Activated.
Hestes and on, Boerman. It's Willow, Conning.
Willikin's resistance force continued to grow, adding more skilled men to its ranks.
Activated. Deactivated. Activated.
Always fled.
Deactivated.
In Hester?
It's in Shetendeus! Between us they are! Hestes and on, Boerman!
Look at jou weer moet redden nu, Tulkas.
Yahweh Shetan! Each spark is seeker for actors.
Willikin spotted a group of English fighters engaged in battle with the enemy and rushed to their aid.
Fortwarde Freckes! Mit Baldenes!
Jedet Hestes! Kväven Schäten!
Niemand too much arrows!
Get thee ready for Hestes. Haken, nu Hestes. Wow, stirre!
Something to Shetton, crossbow on their way.
Yeah, understand this to a head.
Knitters! In the sun!
Willikin's archers had decimated the French reinforcements. But undeterred, the French mustered what troops they could and launched another attack on the castle. The tenacity of Hubert de Burgh's loyal soldiers forced Prince Louis and the rebel barons to abandon their siege at Dover. And thanks to the efforts of Willikin's fearless archers, England remained in King John's hands. In the year prior to the defense of Dover, King John's defiance of the Magna Carta had mired England in a rebellion known as the First Barons' War. Across England, barons broke ties with the crown and seized important cities, including Rochester. With his reign under threat, John deployed his forces to retake Rochester and capture the traitors. King John's men arrived at the outskirts of Rochester, set to retake the castle and drive out the rebel barons within. But Rochester was a formidable fortress that protected the route to London, and the rebel barons were prepared to lay down their lives to hold it. Before King John's men could hope to retake the castle, they would need to reinforce their position by capturing the village of Chatham.
Sword ahead.
The king's men secured Chatham and began preparing for an arduous siege. Rochester's keep was protected by strong stone walls. The king's army would need mighty siege weapons to break through.
What of serpent Shetton?
What needeth be undone?
Thine Hester, each will.
Beresset jou Arwayman, and Switha.
Crossbowers, ich heere.
Men of armies, ich forstet in his.
Arita, what needeth worker? Build end that Rita new. And seely be builded thing. What needeth be undone? Ikill happy that he building anon. He may. Ikill build that for me. Labor good a work.
Yeah, you ready for Hestes?
Yeah, you ready for Hestes? Building to put an upper. Good a worker, done a Rita. Lockers, what needest thou of me? Be ready for the next worker on the roller. He'll get this building, he builded for thee. He bore way that hit in and builded, and he builded well. Yeah, he ready for Hestes. He bore way that this is he builded, and he builded well. I'll mest ilkay and coon what he can doing.
King John's forces were struck by a raiding group of rebels sallying from the castle.
Ready to gone. Ich hab Schiss auf the foe!
Now! We next couldn't be us under the hand with us!
Ready to go. Building to put it up. He'll get this building, he builded for they. He can't feign mid that. Be ready for the next worker on the roller. Building to put an upper.
Serge engines up and ready. Marikidon, move it, ala Isazita.
These sergeants are down. Sergeant we can't get on with here!
What need is
Sergeants at arms, jaren fredon. The rest shall be obeyed. Ankommen. City for a silly little walk. We fell in again, me duty sergeants at arms. Your behest shall be done. 10 meter on some tiddy camping. Understood.
The Serge engines on and ready. Serge engines, team to leaving. Trebuchet Ardita
Says thou, pusheth our way man, Hestes Ilka Thieves.
Crossbows mashing the Hester.
Hestes, ala Isazita. Siege artillery's moving out. Serge engines up and ready. I only stop it. The crew on the silent! Waiting for it. Engines, listen! Hestes for the engine.
Rochester's outer wall crumbled to King John's men, and they descended on the keep.
Serge engines up and ready.
What shall he do?
Is he ready for commands?
It is team, Vites.
Are we stuck together? 10 meter on some tiddy camping.
Standen and feet.
The mark is in prison!
The Serge engines on ala Isazita. Engines, listen!
No Hester's coming, men. It will be
Serge
done.
engines, the only shot.
Ready to read it. Riding out for command.
You're there, you see, you awake. Ankommen. Sit there for a silly little...
Yeah, he ready for Hestes. The doorway that hit is he builded, and he builded well. Think he'll get this building he builded for they? Yeah, he ready for Hestes? Yes, sir. The doorway that hit is he builded, and he builded well.
Hearken to Hestes, young men.
Bale club, then.
They're hiding at the back.
Ready to gone.
The king's men discovered the farmlands that supplied the rebels at Rochester. If the rebels lost access to the food supplies, some of them would be forced to flee. They had the opportunity to weaken the rebellion by eliminating the castle's supplies.
Engines at the ready!
With supplies critically low, the rebel commander discharged his weakest fighters, hoping to preserve what little food remained. Fearing further dissent against his rule, King John ordered safe passage for the surrendered rebels away from Rochester. With the farms alight, King John's chokehold on the rebels was tightening. Cut off from all hope of resupply, more of the rebels were forced to abandon the fight.
The Serge engines on your way. Getting
The Great Keep at Rochester fell at the hands of the King's army, securing both the castle and the route to London. While the fight for England raged on, a desperate King John clung to the throne. When forces loyal to King John undermined Rochester Castle, it spelled doom for the rebels inside. Within days, they had surrendered. But the rebel barons weren't done yet. Their ally, Prince Louis of France, had sent an invasion force to help the barons overthrow King John. Then, in late 1216, the king fell ill with dysentery and died. His son, just 9 years old, was crowned King Henry III. It was now up to the young king's regent, the 70-year-old legendary knight William Marshal, to protect the crown. He faced a near impossible challenge. England was crumbling. Rebels were taking town after town. But William Marshal bided his time and prepared to defeat the rebels. Then in May 1217, he got the chance that he'd been waiting for. William discovered that the rebels planned to simultaneously besiege both Dover Castle and Lincoln Castle. With rebel forces split and weakened, William Marshal led his royalist army to Lincoln. The castle on one side of the city was still controlled by royalists, under its formidable constable, Lady Nicola de la Haye. But the streets of the city were under rebel control. On May 20th, 1217, the Royalist Relief Force, led by William Marshal, arrived to retake the rebel-controlled city. The future of England rode on the success of this mission.
Deactivated.
When forces loyal to King John undermined Rochester Castle, it spelled Troops loyal to the king held the castle at Lincoln, while outside, rebels controlled the city. The defenders had to hold the castle until reinforcements arrived, under the command of the king's knight, William Marshall.
Please wait. Trainer activated. Activated.
Dressed, y'all highwaymen, Hestus and Unborn. Boa is Iboon.
What needeth they undone? If you'll have it that he built it or not, Pitlock as God. If you'll build a that for they.
Intended place. It cannot do.
What needeth they undone? Build them they that Rita knew. Sealy e builded thing. See fate, yea, tit to enden. He'll build a that for they. He'll have he that build it not.
Hey, the cunning shots! Bannon help!
The king's men discovered a building belonging to the rebels. To secure Lincoln, they would need to destroy the rebels' military structures. The king's men tore through the rebel fortifications, diminishing the enemy's military presence. The castle now faced a new attack from the rebels' French allies. The king's army had almost regained control of the city. The king's army razed the last of the rebels' military buildings, but the French siege continued. If the king's men hoped to lift the French siege, they would need to destroy the enemy forts on the outskirts of Lincoln.
Coming on. We are
At last, the King's Knight William Marshal arrived with his forces. While a hard battle remained, there was now hope for the young King's army. William Marshal's forces were welcomed in Stowe, a nearby town loyal to the king. The King's men uncovered one of the French forces' siege camps near Lincoln.
Tolkis! Sind dich aber wirklich bestiegen!
Hester ist jetzt. Stirren, men. Wir sinken destroyer.
The king's army tore through the French fort, weakening the enemy siege.
Young men.
Meters are ready for stir.
Activated. Deactivated.
William Marshal and Nicolas de la Haye had saved the city, and with it, the kingdom. William Marshal's success in retaking Lincoln was an overwhelming victory for the Royalists. The rebel barons had been defeated, and their French allies driven out of England altogether. William Marshal now focused on creating a stable kingdom for the young King Henry III. To maintain the backing of the rebels, in 1217, a royal seal of approval was given to a reissued Magna Carta, limiting the power of the monarchy. Many barons held lands in both England and Normandy. But now they faced a choice. On which side of the Channel would they make their home? Many chose England. The cross-Channel kingdom was over, establishing a clear English identity. But the impact of the Normans on England's evolution is still felt today. Almost 1,000 years later, the surviving Norman castles and cathedrals still dominate the landscape. In the midst of the modern city, William the Conqueror's fortress, the Tower of London, remains a powerful reminder of their legacy. But it's the unseen influence of the Normans that endures. The Norman invasion changed the English language and established the foundations of modern parliament and governance. And it's all because one man, William the Conqueror, claimed the English crown that he believed by rights was his. The Normans conquered a country and changed the course of England forever. At Guédelon in France, to understand how castles were constructed, they're building one from scratch, using just the tools and materials of the medieval age. It's a 25-year project, the world's biggest archaeological experiment. The most important defensive feature of any castle was the wall surrounding it.
Castle walls had to be incredibly thick in order to resist attack and absorb the impact of projectiles fired from trebuchets.
The curtain wall was over 20 feet deep, interspersed with towers. In earlier Norman castles, they were square. But while on crusade, European knights saw that eastern towers were round. They realized that eliminating corners not only made them stronger, but also provided a better view of the surrounding landscape. Completing the walls will take some 30,000 tons of sandstone.
Transport costs in the Middle Ages were incredibly expensive. So having a good supply of local stone close to the castle was vital.
To extract it from the quarry, first a row of holes is hand-drilled.
Once all the holes are ready, I'm ready to put in the iron wedges, and I'm ready to split it open by hitting very hard on each wedge with a big sledgehammer.
The stone is split into usable blocks, then transported using horsepower and human effort. This treadwheel crane can lift up to half a ton.
The walls are built like sandwiches. On the outside, you have facing walls built from better quality stones. And the inside, the rubble cores, they're built with softer stones and other offcuts from the quarry. And they're built up in layers with a very thick, coarse mortar.
This ingenious method makes the walls better able to withstand hits from a trebuchet. Sandstone is too hard to be carved into intricate windows, vaults, and steps. Instead, softer, more expensive limestone is used. These sophisticated building techniques make castles the ultimate feats of medieval engineering. It's a testament to their construction that so many still stand today. Some events leave a deep mark on history, but none on the land. This is the site of the Battle of Hastings. After almost 1,000 years, no traces of the bloody conflict can be seen. But here, the fate of England turned. It's where a king was killed, and his victor claimed the throne. October 14th, 1066. We know what happened here on this day, thanks to this. The Bayeux Tapestry. A carefully preserved, illustrated record of events. It shows the main players. Harold, the newly crowned Anglo-Saxon King of England, and his challenger, William, Duke of Normandy. William claimed the previous king had promised him the crown. So, he assembled an army and prepared to sail to England to fight King Harold for the throne. But a storm thwarted his plans. Meanwhile, Harold discovered that a Viking invasion had landed in the north. Another threat to his crown. So he raced to fight them. In France, William waited for the right conditions to sail across the Channel to England. The weather cleared. He seized his chance. 250 miles north, Harold had defeated the Vikings. Now, hearing of William's arrival, his army sped south. At 9 o'clock in the morning, on this hill, William's Norman army were ready to do battle with Harold's Anglo-Saxon men. The stage was set, and up for grabs, England itself. At the Battle of Hastings, the death of one man changed the course of history. The Anglo-Saxon king one weapon more than any other dominated warfare in the Norman period: the crossbow. 14th century crossbows like this were the culmination of centuries of development. With limbs made of steel, they were incredibly powerful. But earlier Norman crossbows had limbs made of wood,
there was a limit to how powerful these wooden bows could be.
So, the idea that Norman crossbows were a powerful weapon is really a myth. Despite this, they were effective at medium range, and that was enough in battle. Drawing the bow repeatedly took a lot of strength. Thankfully, help was at hand.
A crossbowman spanned his weapon with a device called a belt and claw.
This gave him extra leverage, allowing him to use his back and legs to draw the string.
Crossbowmen were vulnerable on a battlefield, so they carried large shields called pavises, so they could hunker down behind, load, pop up, shoot, and then duck back down again to reload.
Crossbows were accurate, took less training, and used cheaper ammunition than the longbow. Most importantly, you could wait to take your shot, so they were perfect for siege situations. To protect crossbowmen when they were defending castles, they used specially built wooden galleries, called hoardings. But shooting down towards an approaching enemy presented its own problems. How to stop the bolt from falling off the crossbow before it could be shot?
What they did is just place the thumb loosely on the top of the bolt, which is just enough with light pressure to hold it in place.
Around 1200, the Norman wooden crossbow was superseded by a new design, the composite bow. With limbs made from horn and sinew, they could be made more compact than a wooden bow. And they could deliver up to 4 times the punch. They were, however, more expensive. So whether on the battlefield or the castle rampart, simple wooden crossbows remained the main weapon of the day. William the Conqueror had recaptured York from the rebels. Now he wanted to teach them a lesson for defying him. He began a brutal campaign of destruction to crush any further resistance, known as By 1100, the medieval knight was dressed from head to toe in mail.
Mail is really like a metal fabric. It moves and behaves like a cloth, but is actually made of hundreds and thousands of interlocking iron rings.
It could turn and deflect a sword blade.
As an armor, mail didn't work all by itself. It needed the addition of a padded coat. The coat absorbed the shock of the blow, whilst the mail turned away the cut. Together, they formed an incredibly effective protection.
The first stage in making mail was to create wire to the right thickness. To do this, it was pulled through a drawing plate, which had a series of ever smaller holes, until you got wire of the desired gauge.
To make the rings, we wind the wire onto a mandrel.
And then we take it off the mandrel and cut the rings.
So I've flattened the overlapping ends of the ring, and I've pierced a hole through it. And now Nick has to put a rivet in it. The basic construction of mail would be a ratio of 4:1. So each ring goes through 4 of its fellows. Here you can see I've made a set of 5, which will then be joined to other sets of 5 to create a sheet of mail.
Mail had to be tailored to a perfect fit. It had to be shaped for feet and legs, arms and hands, and, of course, the head. A skilled mail maker could make very precise shapes.
Of course, for more complicated parts of the body, like elbows, we can actually tailor it in 2 different directions at the same time.
Yeah. So if we fold this in half, we have an elbow.
One of the main benefits of tailoring in mail was that it meant a knight didn't have to carry a single ring of extra weight that he didn't need to.
The mail to cover a knight from head to toe required about 200,000 rings.
High-status knights would have had their mail edged with gold, but most importantly, it had to be functional.
Clad in mail with his shield and helmet, the knight was well equipped to face the weapons of the day. While Bayeux burned, King Henry pressed his advantage. William the Conqueror's sons had resolved their long feud over Normandy. With King Henry, Norman domination over England was marked by their imposing castles and new laws. But one passion of theirs also impacted the land: hunting. The Norman nobility, both men and women, shared a love of hunting with birds of prey. To preserve their hunting grounds, they took ownership of the land and outlawed hunting by commoners. Falcons hunt by flying to a great height, then dive-bombing their prey. They are kept hunting fit, using a lure, a pad of leather with bait attached. This prepared them for catching their prey, usually other birds such as rooks and pheasants. While out hunting, a falcon might give chase to its prey far from the party. So, riders would follow them cross-country on horseback to witness the action. After a falcon had caught its prey, it was fed and would not fly again that day. This meant many birds had to be taken on a hunt to keep the nobility entertained. Rather than falcons being carried on horseback, which would jostle them, they were transported on a frame called a cadge. Although falconry was a horseman's sport, hawking was enjoyed on foot. Hawks, unlike falcons, have broad wings and hunt by following their prey in straight flight, often low to the ground, through woodland. Hunting by sight, a falcon's vision is highly developed. When not hunting, they were kept calm by putting on a leather hood. The darkness stopped them becoming overstimulated and restless. Lords of the sky, controlled by the lords of the land. Falcons and hawks were symbols of power and status. They were central to Norman identity. A counterweight trebuchet was the king of all siege engines. A catapult capable of smashing down castle walls from great distances. At Warwick Castle in England, they've built a replica, one of the largest in the world. Originating in 7th century China, by the 13th century, trebuchets had evolved into devastatingly powerful weapons.
Such a simple design, but so effective.
It has several key features. A pivoted arm with a weight at one end, and a sling to hold the projectile at the other. To prime, the 6-ton weight is raised using tread wheels.
So this is one of the wheels, one of two that's attached to an axle, which would lift the counterweight, weighing 6 tons. It's based on muscle power alone.
What's essential about launching a projectile as far as possible is making sure that this end of the arm is moving as fast as possible. So once that weight drops, it really sends this point of the arm moving at its highest velocity.
This was done by positioning the pivot close to the counterweight and by launching the projectile from a sling. When released, the sling whips round, vastly increasing the launch speed. Trebuchets were carefully aimed, like modern guns.
In order to weaken the castle walls or even breach them, you had to make sure that the projectiles hit the same spot every single time.
For each projectile to follow the same trajectory, they all had to be the same weight and shape. To achieve this, masons used a gauge.
Now I'm going to load this projectile into the sling. Oh, this one must weigh about 25 kilograms, but some projectiles can get up to 150 kilograms. That's the weight of 2 men.
Trebuchets were also used to throw burning tar, beehives, even dead bodies. Anything to cause maximum distress to the enemy.
Did you hear that whoosh?
It was the counterweight trebuchet's lethal combination of power and accuracy that made it the ultimate medieval siege weapon. Victory over King Stephen at Lincoln gave Matilda the upper hand in her fight for the English crown. But in the years that followed, fragile loyalties shifted. At Wallingford, in the shadow of the castle, Matilda's faction, commanded by her son Henry, proved it was still willing . Year prior to the defense of Dover, King John's defiance of the Magna Carta.
People often imagine that castle walls were just left as bare stone, but in fact they weren't. They were plastered, painted, and decorated.
The process of making medieval paint begins in a quarry.
This is a sandstone with a really high iron content. In it, we find pockets of ochre. This is iron oxide, like rust, and the ochre is one of the main ingredients in pigment making.
First, the ochre is crushed into a fine powder.
The finer the particles in paint, the better the paint will be.
Once ground up, water is added. Then the mixture is sieved.
This is the exact opposite of making pasta at home. At home, when you sieve your pasta, you then keep it for your meal. Here, what's going to end up in the sieve will be discarding.
What's needed are the tiny particles suspended in the water.
Once it's dry, it's going to look something like this. You can see that all the water has evaporated, leaving just this very fine crust, which will then be ground into the fine pigment which is used to make paint.
But ochre's colour palette doesn't end there. If it's heated, something magical happens. Yellow ochre turns red. And heating it for even longer creates a whole spectrum of colours.
It's been burnt for over 72 hours at 1,000 degrees Celsius, and that gives us this incredible purple colour.
To turn the pigment into paint, it's bound together with egg and tree sap.
A popular motif in the Middle Ages was the use of stones and roses. That's where you paint on blocks of stone to make it look like you could afford to pay stonemasons to produce dress blocks of stone and then decorate them with 5-petaled flowers.
So, medieval castles were far from the gloomy places we imagine today. They were full of colour and light. William Marshall's success in retaking Lincoln was an overwhelming victory for the Royalists.